Raise some
cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night. We'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change. Time is now. We gotta raise some cane.
Welcome to the Raising Cane Show. I'm your host, Nate Kane. And today we have a truly special guest with us, a man whose legal career has spanned decades and whose dedication to upholding the principles of justice and the Constitution has left an indelible mark on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Joining me is Judge Retired Francis T. Crimmins, Jr. Judge Crimmins has served as a district court justice and later as the chairman of the Massachusetts State Ballot Law Commission. With his vast experience, he brings a wealth of knowledge about the judicial system, the significance of judicial appointments, and how the legal framework impacts everyday citizens. At a time when the judiciary is under more scrutiny than ever, with political polarization and debates over court reform, today's conversation will shed light on how our judicial appointments are shaping the future of our nation. So let's dive into some crucial questions and gain some insights from one of the best legal minds out there. Judge Crimmins, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you for having me.
So I guess, one of the things that I think would be important for our audience starting off here, not every state is the same in the way that judges are appointed. So, I've never heard about, this position of governor's council, but can you start by telling us a little bit about what that is and how judges get appointed in your state of Massachusetts?
Sure. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has judges who are appointed by the elected governor. We had a constitution that goes back to 1780, 7 years before the U.S. Constitution, Massachusetts being one of the original 13 colonies. So we're very proud that John Adams put that Constitution together with the founding fathers, and we wanted to make sure that the awesome power of the elected governor did not make somebody a king, because after all, that's what we were getting away from. So in Massachusetts, the founders made sure that the elected governor could nominate a judge or a clerk magistrate for those important jobs, but their nominee would have to be vetted to get the advice and consent of a executive council. The Constitution called it an executive council. It since has morphed into the name governor's council, and it called for 8 separate districts. 8 districts, so one person from each of those 8 districts. So Massachusetts, with a population in excess of 7 million legal residents, will have 8 districts comprised of over 900,000 people. So to give you an analogy, in the U.S. Constitution, when the President of the United States nominates somebody to be on the Supreme Court or one of the inferior courts, that nominee is vetted and goes before the Senate for advice and consent of the Senate. Now, a lot of states, again, follow that model. Massachusetts, again, had a constitution before there was a U.S. Senate. So we came up with this executive council. A lot of states, for example, will have checks and balances on the appointed the power of the governor to appoint and have that nominee go before their state senate, for example. But again, we have this 8-person elected body. It's called the Governor's Council. So I'm running in one of those districts. It's called District 2, and that is what happens. So it's a check and balance on the awesome power of the governor to appoint the key people in the third branch of government, which again makes us different. This is all about the rule of law.
That's very fascinating. I never thought about, 'cause, I had wondered why they had this in Massachusetts, but of course, Massachusetts had its own constitution long before the U.S. Constitution was written. So that makes perfect sense. Judge Crimmins, how do you think that judicial appointments are currently impacting the interpretation of the Constitution, both at the federal level and at the state level, particularly in today's politically charged environment?
Great question. Whether it's a federal appointment or a state appointment, each person who becomes a judge raises their right hand and takes an oath to support the Constitution of the United States. And we see judges both in states and on the federal level that don't seem like they always are supporting the Constitution of the United States. They seem to be hybrid judges. So like in Massachusetts, before you take your oath, well, when you take your oath of office, and you have to take that to take your job, you take an oath to support the Constitution of the United States. I agree with the Constitution of the United States. You take an oath to support the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I agree with that. And some people taking these jobs seem like they have their own opinion of what the Constitution should be, and they want to pick and choose, like it's a hybrid thing. The Constitution's okay for you, but not you. I believe in the Constitution. So if that third branch of government is supposed to be out of the political realm, if you want to run for office to change laws, run for the legislative branch, run for positions in the executive branch. But the judicial branch is supposed to be that independent branch of government that's not partisan, where we, the people of the United States, agree and give our consent to be governed by the laws in the other branch. And when somebody is accused of breaking those laws, they get a fair hearing in the judicial branch.
So you've served as both a judge and in municipal government. Can you speak to how judicial decisions directly affect everyday citizens, perhaps in ways they might not immediately realize?
Well, for people to have confidence in the court system, they have to believe that what happens in the court system is fair and just. In Massachusetts, judges are appointed. Basically, they get a commission for life. They're not elected, they're appointed. So once a judge is appointed and goes through the process with this governor's council, you never get a chance to ask them their position about anything. So first of all, everybody has to feel like they have a stake, because if we don't think that it is fair, first of all, people won't serve jury duty. People won't believe in the rules that come out of court hearings. They'll ignore it. People won't want to be witnesses. I mean, it affects all of us. People see crime all the time. They don't want to get involved because they don't believe, for example, often they'll be protected if they come forward. And when people go through the process, they don't seem like people give them a fair hearing and things like that. We all have a stake in making sure this system works. And when people doubt that and they lose confidence in the rule of law, they're giving up one of the beliefs in what makes this country the great country that we have. You know, when those constitutions were written, there was nowhere else in the world that had three branches of government. I mean, We have an independent branch. We have that symbol of Lady Justice with the eyes closed. Doesn't matter who's in front of Lady Justice. You weigh the evidence and it goes this way or that way, right? People participate in this. There is nobody in our system that acts as both the judge, jury, and executioner. They're separate functions. Jurors, people have a right under the Constitution to a jury of their peers. Those jurors are the fact finders. Judges interpret the rule of law and give people the rule of law, and then they mete out whatever the appropriate sentence is on a criminal case. So when we have our institutions under attack, we're losing a lot in this country. And one of those institutions is the court system and the rule of law, because some people are forming an opinion that what happens in court isn't fair and impartial because people are using the court system to weaponize certain ideas that are not holding on in the legislative realm.
And, you know, there's a scripture in Amos chapter 5, and I'm reminded of it in talking with you. That chapter is all about injustice in the courts in particular, and God's judgment that came upon the nation of Israel because of this injustice, whether it was people not getting a fair hearing because they were poor and the person that going against them was rich, or whether it was bribery, or whether it was, it says that they despise those that tell the truth. And so it lays out this set of issues that God has with what's going on in the courts within Israel at the time. And it's interesting to me because then after that, it lays out the judgment that's coming on the nation because of it. So justice is something that's obviously extremely important to God. And the other thing that was fascinating about that is that there's this one verse after it lays out all these things, terrible things that are coming. It says, love what is good and hate evil. And it says, and maintain justice in the courts. And in doing so, you may perhaps hold off the judgment of God. And when I came across that verse, I came across it in a very personal way. I had just gotten done. I just come home after spending 3 months working on election integrity and seeing multiple courts turn down cases where there was tons of evidence of wrongdoing on the basis of standing and all this thing. And I was an expert witness in 7 cases. I was so disappointed with what happened. And I came home pretty, quite honestly, distraught because I saw evidence of massive election fraud. And I'm talking hundreds of thousands of counterfeit ballots. In the end, 57 courts, 57 cases, not one of them allowed for an evidentiary hearing. And so I spent some time just in prayer and seeking God and asking God, what the heck is going on in our country? And he led me to Amos chapter 5. And so I believe that one of the most important things that we need to be doing right now as a country is focusing on maintaining justice in our courts. It's our last stand. It is the last stand. If you don't have justice in the courts, you really don't have a country at that point. You become like every other third world country that has 10 pot dictators, and that's something that really concerns me. There's also been evidence that has come out even in the federal courts where we've seen massive abuses of the FBI, for example, utilizing Section 702 of FISA, which is unwarranted searches, which I signed the non-disclosure for that because I was part of NSA at one point. And those tools are never to be used on American soil, and they're never to be used against American citizens, period. And in fact, we were warned that if we did, that we'd be looking at 10 years in jail for deprivation of rights under color of law. And yet there have been federal judges that have come forward and have said, hey, they've adjudicated cases where there was over 200,000 illegal search warrants that were issued against, or not search warrants, sorry, illegal searches without warrants, utilizing Section 702 to spy on American citizens. We've also seen recent cases where you have these big corporations like Google and Facebook and Twitter, where they discovered that the federal government was buying data from them to spy on American citizens. And, basically violating people's rights through a third party. There's been some recent cases that have there was a recent case that went before the Supreme Court. I think they kicked it back down to one of the lower courts. But, these problems that I see going on right now are a perfect example of where I think the courts have such an important role to play in protecting us, even against our own government and the overreach and abuse of our own government against its own citizens. And that's why I really see the judge as being the last stand. They are the last stand to protect the Constitution. Talk about how you feel about that and kind of where you see things in some of the problems that have gone wrong in the law as of late.
Well, I agree with the thrust of what you just talked about, Nate. Judges are so important for protecting our rights. And the judicial system, unfortunately, is completely dependent upon the legislative branch of government for the resources to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
When you have to remember, when I was a judge in a courtroom, there were a lot of people in that courthouse that make the whole system work. From the time the public goes through the front door, there's security officers. The judges don't hire those people. That's a different agency that does that. A person comes in to the courtroom. A judge is usually brought out by a court officer. The judge doesn't pick or hire the court officer. There's a clerk that is an independent person that is appointed by a clerk. The lawyers are either privately retained or people have a public defender that's appointed for them. And the judge doesn't control the lawyers. The judge doesn't control the district attorney or the person that works for the elected district attorney. And despite that, a judge has to make sure it all works. So it's a very important job to make sure. And you need people in that job that understand just what you were talking about. And they have the temperament first to deal with people that are all interested parties, that they are people that know the difference between somebody that is just had a bad day one day and the difference between that person and somebody who's a bad actor and that type of thing. They know the difference. They need that. They have to have life experience that has shown that they know the difference between those type of people, because we need those type of things in the court. So those people that hold those positions are very, very important to making sure the whole thing. And you are right. Sometimes that's the only redress someone has, because those other things that affect people's lives are under the control of the other branches of government. You know, when you mention some things that happen with certain agencies of the federal government or some other state agencies, they're controlled by other departments, not the judge. So the judicial branch is sometimes gets compromised by the whims of the legislative branch and the executive branch, because if they don't fall in line, there is redress in the budget, and you don't have enough resources to do all the things you have to do. Even in the population in the state I'm in is a lot bigger than it used to be around the time of World War II, but there's not a lot of new courthouses, and there's not a lot of new courtrooms in those courthouses to meet the demands. So we need resources, and you would be hard pressed. You get around all over the country, you'd be hard pressed to find a time where you had people holding signs saying, support our courts, give more funding for courts. There aren't too many advocates for more funding for courts.
I think people take them for granted.
That's right. You know, and a lot of people think democracy is something that just happens by itself. Voting is important. Serving on jury duty is important. Honoring a subpoena to be a witness or a summons to be a witness, that's important. So all those things are very important. And we have to teach people what our Constitution says. I mean, in a lot of schools in the state I'm in, you could graduate from high school and only have 1 year of U.S. history. Picture that.
Yeah.
180 days in a school year, 42-minute periods, about 120 hours of instruction to cover everything.
Yeah.
That's
I think civics is extremely important. In fact, it's disappointing that you don't see it in more schools as a regular part of the curriculum because clearly we've got a problem today with several generations of really having seen no duty to vote. I mean, that was one thing that surprised me was even in my primary. I think we had 18% of registered voters that came out to vote. 18%, that's it.
Right.
And that doesn't even include those who are eligible to vote but don't register. So we've got a serious problem there, and that's something that I think needs to be worked on all the way across the board. Now, on that note, during your time as chairman of the Massachusetts State Ballot Law Commission, how crucial was judge oversight or judicial oversight in maintaining the integrity of the electoral process? Can you share any particular significant moments from your tenure?
Well, I was just there for a cup of coffee, just 2 years, but I was appointed by then Governor Charles Baker in 2022, and I served until 2024. It's a 5-person commission, and the governor appoints the 5 members. I was the chair. There were 2 other members that were great members, Attorney Joseph Eisenstadt and former state senator Joseph Boncory. So, and then we had vacancies, and that was a concern because after the governor left, there were vacancies, and it takes time for the new administration to fill them. But we had a very important case, and that important case that we had that happened in January of this year, 2024, was a case where some objectors tried to have Donald Trump kicked off the ballot in Massachusetts. And in the Secretary of State, so to answer your question about the rule of law, this was an interesting case because first, our law provides that if you want to bring that type of an action, you can bring it before the State Ballot Law Commission. And prior to this year, the elected Secretary of State, William Galvin, had made a decision in his office that the person who the Republican Party said should be on the ballot, Donald Trump, should be on the ballot. Because it's up to the state parties to say who appears on primary ballots and that type of thing, and who will appear on other ballots. And Massachusetts has a primary in March. So the question was, who is going to appear in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on the Republican side for the office of president? Now, there were some people that objected to that, and they said the following. And by the way, the Secretary of State, the elected Secretary of State, William Galvin, is a Democrat. Okay? And so there were some people that said the state of Colorado has made a decision that Donald Trump shouldn't be on their state ballot, and it was going up in their court system. So they said they tried to bootstrap that position by saying, gee, if Colorado and Maine say he shouldn't be on the ballot, you folks in Massachusetts should make the same decision because it's the same case. And we said it's not the same case because, first of all, every state has different laws. So the commission I was on, looked at the laws in Massachusetts, and the laws in Massachusetts stood for the proposition that what the Secretary of State had decided was correct. And that was ultimately the decision. But we heard the objectors in the other side, and there were legal briefs, and we read those legal briefs, and we took our time with it. They got their day at that hearing level, and that's the step they had to do before they went to the court system. They had to exhaust their administrative remedy, and we were the administrative level, the commission. And there's a law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that said those cases go to the commission. So the quick 1-2 was this. After a hearing, we decided that under the law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the state party had the right to put Donald Trump on, and there was no other action taken in any other forum that suggested he should not be allowed to stand for president. And even if they came up with something, he wasn't even, the parties hadn't had their conventions and picked their nominees and yet. And so we supported the law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So our decision got appealed to the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts. And there was a single justice upheld our position and made it. And then they tried to appeal his decision to the full bench of the Supreme Judicial Court. And it ultimately became moot because of some other things in the U.S. Supreme Court and all that. So
thank God.
So the process was, it worked. The process worked. There was a Democrat Secretary of State. There was a commission chaired by a Republican, and party politics had nothing to do with that decision that we had. So that was an example of, for example, our commission, not just me, the commission members working on what the law said, Secretary of State and the counsel in his office deciding what the law said. And we did that despite what the sentiments were in the heat of the moment with other people objecting for other reasons. The point was the people should decide who they want to vote for, not a bunch of people on a commission.
Yeah. The appointment process for judges is designed to ensure impartiality, but in your experience, do you think that politics seeps its way into the process? And if so, how do we ensure that judges remain neutral? Because like here in West Virginia, judges, they don't have a party affiliation. And there are good arguments I've heard for why that should not be the case, because and now I know, like, in my heart of hearts, I wish they did show their party affiliation, because I would trust a judge that's a Republican a lot more than I would one that's a Democrat. But I can see the error of thinking that because if things ever changed, if we're primarily Republican state, and if it ever changed to be primarily Democrat, I might not have that opinion. I might want there to be a neutrality and not have any party affiliation. What is your opinion on that?
Well, elections have consequences. The elected governor under our Constitution in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts gets to appoint people to the bench. So we have a governor that was elected a couple of years ago, and her nominees of people she's have appointed to the bench, reflect her positions and her political beliefs. And there are consequences to that, because the process is the governor picks their own committee to give them names of people that governor wants to fill those positions. That's all done in private. That's confidential. The public's not involved in that. And that can be a highly politicized process if you don't have a screening committee that is big enough and broad enough to cover a lot of different opinions.
Mhm.
And in the state I'm in, there's criticism that the elected governor has a small committee for these type of opinions for the process. And if people aren't in line with her political philosophy and ideology, those people won't get nominated. So that makes it even more important for the role of the governor's council, because that nominee has to go before the governor's council. And you have to get a majority vote out of the 8 members. You have to get at least 5 out of the 8 who are voting. And if there's a tie, the lieutenant governor that is voted in with the governor will break the tie. So that's a vote for the governor, that type of thing. So it does get political. We had a situation in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts where the elected governor nominated a person that she had a personal relationship with for a vacancy on the highest court in the Commonwealth, and she has the right to do that. And the person's a good judge. But the question for the governor's council should be, are you going to recuse yourself when the executive office of the governor has a case before the Supreme Court? That type of thing. That question doesn't get asked when you have people on the council that are all in one party, governor's council, when people are all in one party and they don't want to ask those questions because the governor doesn't want them to ask those questions. The public has the right to know these type of things. The public has the right to know the qualifications. And if someone feels that that candidate is a good candidate, you should tell the public why. It's the only time you have a chance to do it. When I served almost 18 years. I served as a judge from 1992 to 2010. I did a pivot in my career because I, like a lot of people, had kids to go to college, and to take care of that, I did what I had to do, like everybody else does when they have that type of thing. So I had left the bench at that time. But in that era, most people that got appointed served for at least 15 years. I actually served almost 3 years more than most people. But so 15 years, you're on the bench for a lot of cases. There's only one time you get to hear what type of judge that person might be, and that's their hearing before the governor's council. So it's a very important position. And if I'm elected to that, what I'd try to bring to the council would be to ask those questions so the public will hear what that debate is. Because until COVID, by the way, those hearings weren't being televised. Now, during COVID, unfortunately, the cat got out of the bag because the hearings were televised. And what people saw, they didn't always like. This thing was done pretty much in secrecy for a long time. And then all of a sudden people said, hey, what's this governor's council thing? Because the building wasn't open to the public, so they televised it. Then when people saw what they were looking at, they're scratching their head saying, this doesn't always sound like what we thought it would be.
Right. And kind of similar to what parents experienced when their kids were at home and getting online. They saw for the first time, some of the crazy stuff being taught in the classroom. The downside, to COVID was pretty bad, but the upside, the silver lining was, I think it woke a lot of people up to things that were going on.
Definitely.
Well, folks, we got to cut to a commercial break to give a word to our sponsors. But when we come back, we're going to get into specifically what qualities that you believe need to be prioritized in judicial appointments. And then we're going to talk about your own race and talk about what you bring to the table as compared to your opponent. All right. We'll be right back.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
Welcome back to the Raising Cane Show. I'm here with a retired judge. We are looking at some very serious issues here, and Judge Crimmins has laid out for us a lot of healthy things, I think, to look at in terms of why it's important for there to be impartiality. But obviously, for somebody who's running to be on this judicial appointments committee, he's going to have to look at qualities of these people who are going to be before these people who are going to be appointed judges, or people who the governor is nominating to be appointed. So what are some ways that you mentioned? One of them, which I thought was really insightful before we went to the break, which was you talked about asking the importance of asking questions about a personal relationship, that a judge may have with the governor, and the need to recuse themselves. What are some other examples of things that you would be concerned about, or things that you might want to pay close attention to?
Well, when you're picking a judge, and again, the term that they will serve will be generally at least 15 years, you have to probe into their view about staying independent of other parts of their life that they may have participated in prior to getting that appointment. For example, in Massachusetts, it would be unheard of for a judge to donate to a political candidate, because there's a judicial code of ethics that proscribes that activity. You wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have your own family members doing that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have the case like that happened in New York ever happen in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because if you had donated to a political candidate, or if one of your kids was making their living assisting an opponent of a particular political candidate, you would not be sitting on that case. It just wouldn't happen. And in some states, it's a more political job. And that's what the danger is when we politicize the third branch of government, that type of thing. People need to have confidence in the court system. When people pick a jury trial, there's a process of picking a jury to probe in the venari whether or not someone's biased, and they'll be excused. The same goes for the judge. When I was a judge, I didn't go to political events. I didn't donate to political candidates. You have to stay away from that. So you have to probe that. So when someone's picking a candidate, that's one of the questions you have to ask their position on that, and you have to make sure that people know that right at the start. Are you okay taking the oath to uphold the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or whatever state you're in? Do you have a problem upholding the Constitution of the United States of America? Because when you do that, you give up the right to say, hey, this is my own opinion of what the law should be.
Mm-hmm.
The law is. You accept the law that is. It's not your opinion. You don't say, I'm the smartest boy or girl in the room, and I know what's better for you than you do, and what the legislature did. You take the law as it is, and that's the law you have to accept, and you have to first probe that, because that doesn't come up. You have to see if somebody is suited for public service, because it's tough to be a public servant in today's world, and you have to see if they're willing to do that and take the slings and arrows that go with that, because it's very important that people know they got a fair hearing, when they're before you on a particular matter. So you have to probe those type of things, and you ask those type of questions. So has there been a track record in this nominee's life that shows that beyond having a job and a degree from somewhere and a little certificate from somewhere, have they shown that they can be a public servant and are willing to serve the public and have the temperament for the job, so you can size up, the the mere sinner from the bad actor, you know, that type of thing. You have to be able to tell the difference and have empathy for people, but you still have to apply the law, that type
Mhm.
of thing. And you have to apply it to everybody.
So I want to pivot to your particular race, and a lot of folks, probably wondering why, why am I interested in this race that is, in Massachusetts? And to be honest with you, I've learned something through my own process of running for office, and that is that it is important across the country that we get good candidates in these different positions. It's important that the judicial system in Massachusetts doesn't get corrupted, because as we're seeing, like you mentioned, Colorado, like you mentioned, Maine, and you got things going on in New York that are not so good either in the courts. When we see these types of things happen in other courts, it absolutely can have an impact on us no matter where we live. And a perfect example is them trying to remove Donald Trump from the ballot. So I am all about now looking outside of just my state of West Virginia at the different candidates that are running for office, and hoping to have some sort of influence or impact on making sure that we get good people in office. And a friend of mine had brought your race to my attention, and had expressed to me how important it was that you get elected over your opponent. And so I want to talk about that for a little bit, because I have a clip here, and I'm going to pull this up real quick, of your opponent who's answering a question about representation on the governor's council. And I thought it was interesting. So I want to play this, and I want to get your opinion on it, and how you feel about this. So let me bring that up real quick here. All right. So your opponent in this race, who won the Democrat primary for this running for this position, Tamisha Civil, and so I'm going to play this little clip from her.
Knowing what you do know about how the governor's council operates, if you were elected, do you see yourself trying to make any changes to either the process or the makeup of the council?
Absolutely. As the governor's council, it is my job to have make sure that judicial nominees have representation. We know that for 244 years, there's never been a Democratic woman of color on the council. So representation is the key to the judicial nominee that is looking to help that community. That's one.
So right there, she's saying essentially that your gender, the color of your skin, that is a crucial thing of importance when picking a judicial nominee. How do you feel about that? Do you think that these immutable characteristics that have nothing to do with somebody's character or their qualifications for the job, do you think those are important for the selection of judges?
No. I think a judge has to be fair and impartial to everyone that comes before that particular judge, regardless of race, creed, and color. And going right back to the great words of Martin Luther King, people should be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And we need to have equal justice for all. And that's what the rule of law is all about.
Yep. There's another thing that I want to bring up here, because this friend of mine that was talking to me about this, he brought up a statement that she made at the beginning of this about one of the things that inspired her to run. I'm going to switch over to that real quick here. All right.
Has been inspiring for me because my first cousin was incarcerated for 27 years for a crime he did not commit. He was exonerated in 2021 from all his charges.
Now, she makes this claim about, a cousin of hers that was in jail, that was incarcerated, and then he was exonerated. But I've been informed that that's not the case, that his sentence was commuted, but he wasn't exonerated. They didn't wipe his record. Isn't that true?
Yes, what you said is true, Nate. What my opponent said is 100% not true. I don't question why she says she's running for office, but I question what she just said there. I mean, a person who she represents as her cousin was not wrongfully convicted. He was convicted of a crime when he was either 19 or 20 years of age, and he got a first-degree murder conviction under the felony murder statute, where he participated with a co-defendant into a armed home invasion where someone was stabbed to death and others were held sort of in another room, like a kidnap situation too, so this could happen. They both got first-degree murder convictions. Now, when you get a first-degree murder conviction in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you're not eligible for parole. So what this person did do, to the credit of the person who apparently is a cousin, is he became a model prisoner, and over the course of 27 years, he got the right to have his case acted on favorably by the power of the governor to exercise the rarely used power, especially rarely used by Governor Baker, to commute his sentence from first degree to second degree. Because when you're second degree murder, you do have a chance to get parole. So what happened was, in 2021, this particular person went through, believe it or not, the governor's council, and with and who approved the governor's recommendation to commute the sentence of this particular person from first degree to second degree, so he would be eligible for parole. And the commutation went forward. The parole was granted. He stands convicted today as a murder in the second degree. He was not wrongfully convicted. He served his time, became a model prisoner. He's released on conditions of parole, but he stands convicted of murder in the second degree.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. And I don't know how much of my audience is in Massachusetts, but we have over 1,000 people right now live watching. I think it's things like this that are absolutely critical to expose and to bring to light. Because here's the thing. I'm not going to judge her motivation for why she said what she did, but I can judge what she said as being absolutely false. And if she is somebody who wants to appoint judges, who is asking, the people of Massachusetts to place her in a position of making these critical decisions on matters of law, you would hope that she would be somebody who's well qualified for that position, that would know the difference between a commutation and an exoneration. And that's something that that's the reason I brought it up, because I thought it was important for people to understand and know this. There is a lot of problems that I see going on in the country that can absolutely be prevented if we have the right people in positions of authority, or the right people who can help to make sure that we are getting good judges on the bench. like I mentioned earlier, the judiciary is really our final, they're kind of like the final watchguards of our Constitution. Obviously, we got to be able to see good people get appointed, but I want to ask you another question that has to deal. I want to shift it a little bit towards states' rights, because I think as we see more and more federal government, overreaching into the states, and even the Supreme Court has recognized that with some of their recent decisions. How do you see the role of judges in upholding states' rights in today's legal climate, particularly with the ongoing concerns of federal overreach?
Well, it's a multi-level question, but I'd say this. A judge is sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America in their particular state constitution. And as long as you go by what that Constitution says, you don't have the same problem that happens. The overreaching is generally by the executive branch. The executive branch, we've had a president that has used executive orders to do things that should be done by the legislative branch, because that's what the Constitution says. Forget what I say. That's what the Constitution says. And what should happen is challenges to that should go through the process to the court system on the federal side to go up to the Supreme Court to see if the particular executive is exceeding that authority. Massachusetts, we have a problem because the governor of the state has interpreted a 1983 statute in a very broad way to suggest that illegal immigrants get all the rights and then some as long as you spend one day in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have become a sanctuary state in the Commonwealth, and it's becoming a big budget consideration because there isn't a plan. People seek a spot in the Commonwealth because we have a very broad way of interpreting that statute, and someone should be challenging that statute and its interpretation in the state. Even in the community that I live in, there's people came in to fill up 2 hotels that brought in over 200 families, that produced over 200 kids, and they came at the time of year after the school budgets are already set. So it's a big adjustment for the school system. It's a big adjustment for the kids in the school system. There are certain issues at the school. We have language issues and whatever. Those particular people get all those things. So there's on the states' rights that each state should be doing what they have to do, and you need the appropriate people. Now, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you have an elected attorney general, and you need that elected attorney general to challenge that. But a particular elected attorney general in the state that I live in is very much aligned with the elected governor, who used to be the attorney general. So you're not going to see it in the state I live in. Yeah. But in the other states, if you're in West by God, Virginia, or any other place, people should be challenging those type of things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I always like to give my guests the final word. I have a lot of questions when I bring people on, but sometimes we don't get to the things that they want to say. So Judge, this is your opportunity right now. First and foremost, please tell people where they can find you, where they can donate to your campaign, where they can see what you're about. Do you have a website for your campaign?
Yes, we do. It's www.electcrimmins.com. Crimmins is spelled Crimmins. We're on Facebook. They can get in touch with us easily. District 2 is comprised of 37 communities. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm still practicing law. I'm 68 years old, married with 4 kids. I got 4 grandkids. Why the heck am I doing this? I'm doing this because my kids are bringing up 4 kids of their own, and they are having more challenges than I ever had. I was lucky. You know, I grew up with 2 parents that came out of the greatest generation, and myself and 4 other siblings had a great life. I'm trying to do it for my kids and their kids and everyone else's kids in the next generation. That's why I'm doing it, because these jobs are important. And I have seen what's going on, and somebody should speak up at these hearings, and there should be enough of this. Just check the box and appoint people because somebody checks the box and something like that. You know, people have to speak up and do their part. This is a part of the world that I can make an impact in. You know, everyone has an obligation to do their part to make it a little better. I'm out campaigning, and I hear people talk about the effects of, you know, this illegal immigration, the crime that's going on, and the fact that people aren't held accountable for anything anymore. You know, people talk about, with a straight face, talk about crime has gone down based upon the FBI crime report. That's because no one's reporting crime. I mean, it's a joke, you know, and there are things like that, and people have to speak up. And real people are telling me that, you know, and I am listening to them, and I'm running for them. I'm trying to earn their trust. All I'm trying to do is to make sure that when we put people in the positions of being a judge or a clerk magistrate, which runs a court, that we have the best men and women that want to serve, that uphold the Constitution and do their thing, and then make it a little better for the next one to do that. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't need the job. I've been lucky. I was fortunate. I got a chance to get a college scholarship. I went to law school nights. I worked days, went to law school nights. Like a whole lot of people, been able to do well. I got lucky. Governor Weld appointed me as a judge. Governor Baker appointed me to the other thing on the State Ballot Law Commission. I've been fortunate. I'm trying to give back, and I'm trying to earn the trust of people. This is very important time in the history of the country. You obviously know that. You have a national audience. People in the whole nation know that. And so I'm trying to do this part in the Commonwealth, in District 2, on Governor's Council. And like I mentioned, not to be redundant, most people didn't know about this until that COVID world, where it opened the door a little bit. And now that they've seen it, I think some people are catching on that there's a lot to this thing called the Governor's Council. So I would like to sit on it and work with the other members, the other 7 members, to up the game and get the best people we can. And I thank you for the chance to be on this type of an audience with you, Nate, because this is very important for me, because to reach 900,000 people is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. So on that note, you know, folks, listen, I realize not all of you, in fact, most of you are probably not from Massachusetts, but please reach out to folks that you know in Massachusetts. If you have friends in Massachusetts, let them know how important this is. Make sure and send them this video. And listen, if you can contribute, please do. It's extremely difficult to run races. And I know from watching, when I've been to so many dinners and so many of these Republican dinners when I was running, and it always amazed me because the people who were running in positions like judge or running for, these positions that most people don't even, know what they do. Those are really difficult positions to raise money for, but it's extremely difficult to reach people without the ability to, to send direct mail and things like that. And that costs money. So folks, please, it's critical, and it may have an impact on something as simple as whether or not future presidents can be on the ballot, or whether or not, we see changes and reform and pushback from states on these issues of illegal immigration. I wrote a paper in particular on that issue. And what I talked about is the most serious threat of illegal immigration. There's a lot of threats, but the one that I see is the most dangerous to to our country is the fact that we have a national safety net that is in place because people have paid into a system to put that in place. And that includes even our school systems. I'm glad that you brought that up because the fact is, with all of these people coming here and they are going on welfare and they are going into the system and they are sending their kids into our schools, it is going to have an impact on the budgets. It's going to have an impact on our taxes. It's going to have an impact on availability of services. In places like California, where my brother lives, if he goes to the emergency room, he's looking at being there for several hours because illegal aliens use the emergency room like it's their doctor because they can't refuse them. And these are the kinds of things that are going on, and the impacts, the real impacts of this flood of illegal immigrants. I remember when my kids were in school and I lived in California, that we had a major problem because a lot of the budget was going to English as a second language. And instead of going to, helping my kids get ahead, and, I was a taxpayer. So these are things that I think are extremely important. And who gets appointed to, these councils around the country, those people who are making decisions that will have an impact on judges that are going to be there. That's extremely important. So thank you, Judge, for coming on and for sharing with us these incredible insights today. And also, thank you for your years of service. It is something I think that is extremely important, that people understand their civic duty, and that's something that you certainly have. Before we go, I'd like to close in a prayer. And something I always do because I recognize, like our founders did, that we need the providence of God. There's things that we have to do. We have to do our part, but we need God's help as well. Heavenly Father, I thank you, Lord, for Judge Crimmins and for his service, Lord, to his community and his state. I pray, Lord, that you would bless his endeavor. Lord, I pray for our courts, and not just our federal courts, but Lord, our state courts as well, which it seems that these days so many important battles are being fought. Lord, you revealed to me that verse in Amos chapter 5 about the importance of maintaining justice in the courts. And Lord, I pray that you would please help Massachusetts to pick the right people for the job that are going to do just that are going to help maintain justice in the courts, and that are going to help maintain impartiality with the appointment of judges. Lord, I thank you for all that you've revealed to us through Judge Crimmins tonight, Lord. And I thank you that we've had so many wonderful listeners. I pray your blessing over all of them as well. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all for joining us on the Raising Cain Show. I'm Nate Cain, and it's been an honor to have you with us today. Be sure to follow me on social media at Nate Cain for WV, and catch all my shows by visiting theraisingcainshow.com. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and may God bless you and our republic. Judge, if you don't mind, hang on after the show because I'd like to talk to you a little bit more.
Thank you.
But folks, with that, have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Raise some cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some cane.